Every transaction, honest, transparent, genuine transaction facilitated by money makes both parties to the exchange better off. And with all of the exchanges that are happening all across the economy and all across the world, hey, we should all be increasingly better off. That's what Lincoln talked about. Lincoln talked about the government needs to create the infrastructure and provide the situation so that the people can enjoy rising standards of living. And that, we did experience that. My parents always expected that they would be better off than their parents, and that my generation would be better off than the previous generation. But here we are, both of us, both my wife and I, have to work. How did that happen? And so I realized all kinds of things, like what is the purpose of the women's liberation movement? The purpose of the women's liberation movement must be to create a situation in which women are able to work or have to become like men and wipe out the feminine. Anyway.
John Rockefeller said that was the best money he ever spent.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. That movement.
Yeah, funding the women's liberation movement. Anyway. So that clued me in that there's something really serious going on with money, and I'd better understand what money is. Now, at that moment when I was sitting in the parking lot outside the mall, before I went in, and I realized that, the reason I don't want to shop at the mall is that it will benefit the mall, but I want what they have, because that's what my son wants for Christmas, right? So actually, this is all okay. The problem actually is something to do with the fact that the money isn't capturing or it isn't being distributed properly. It's being misdistributed. And now I had the question. And once I had the question, what is money? How does it work? Why is it the way it was? The whole thing started to open up. The creature from Jekyll Island, and all the stuff about banking. And I'm sitting there, I'm reading. It wasn't the creature from Jekyll Island at that point. It was it was Bernard Lietaer, The Future of Money. And I'm reading, and I'm realizing, oh my God, the banks are not lending us money. So I went and I did exactly what I did with 9/11. I went back and I said, okay, what is my experience? I go to the bank with a $100 bill, and the reason that I go to the bank with a $100 bill is that the $100 bill is money. When I was growing up, I wanted the coins and the dollars. I didn't have a bank account, and my whole experience of money is cash. And cash is anonymous. You can spend it on whatever, and nobody ever asks you where you got it. It's just not a question. Money is the thing, that bill. So I go to the bank with a $100 bill, and I want to deposit it in my bank account, and I hand it to the teller. And now I'm going to do exactly what I did on other occasions, looking at what's actually happened. What's the phenomenon? The teller takes the $100 bill and puts it in the cash drawer, and I do not get to tell her what to do with it. I do not. That's $100 bill is now the bank's. So it goes from the cash drawer to the vault, then where does it go? It goes on the balance sheet of the bank as an asset of the bank. Mm-hmm. There isn't anything else that could happen with it. So she didn't put it in a safe deposit box that's my safe deposit box for me to take it out again. But that's the way depositing money makes it sound. But that's not what happened. So what did she put in my bank account? I know what she put in my bank account. The only thing she could have. That the bank owes me $100. The bank owes, I made a demand loan to the bank of $100, and it's a demand loan because they have to pay me back whenever I demand it. At the ATM machine, when I write a check, whatever. So now there's $100 in my bank account that I think of as my $100 in the bank, but it's really what the bank owes me. So that's the major deception. That is the essence of the banking deception. Because when I need money that I can't get from my parents, and that I don't have a friend who has enough to lend it to me, I go to the bank. And we all do that. Who has enough money to lend me the money to buy a house? Or give me the money to buy a house? Well, actually, my parents did. But that's very unusual. I don't know anyone else who got a house from their parents. So, you go to the bank. And when you go to the bank, the first document that you sign is the promissory note. I promise to pay. And I promise to pay principal and interest. And if it's a 30-year mortgage, I'm going to pay the bank more interest in the beginning than principal, and more principal towards the end than interest. So first I'm going to buy the bank a house. And then I'm going to pay for the house that I think I'm buying with inflated dollars, because it's going to be at the end, more towards the end of the 30-year period. So what happened? What did I just do? I just bought the house a bank. I mean, I just bought the bank a house. Oh my God, how did they ever arrange things that way? So I'm also signing a mortgage, a death certificate, basically. I'm signing a mortgage.
Precisely.
If I default on the loan, they get the house. If I don't fulfill the terms of the loan, and then I'm really into, well, how does this whole thing work? Well, actually, if the check that the bank writes to the seller, to the real estate person, to the title company, to the insurance, to the escrow for the taxes, all of that is exactly the same as the cash. It's what they owe me, or it's what they own. They didn't lend money. They didn't lend any money.
Okay, they didn't.
Oh my God. So the entire culture is a result of me having to buy the bank a house first. So every house in America funded the banks, or the owners of the banks. So they have as much money in interest as we have in houses. That's amazing. That's total. And then all the money, and as I'm reading more about all this, all the money is created as debt, interest-bearing debt by banks. Oh my God, who owns the banks? And there I am, right there. How did banking get started? So, Bernard Lietaer and Paul Grignon and various people talk about the origins of money. And the story that I want to tell is from not at the very beginning. In the very beginning of money, it's a warehouse receipt. So you bring the grain to the warehouse, they give you a receipt. It's got the imprimatur of the combined religious secular authority, the pharaoh or the priest king, and that's what money is, and that's what actually creates civilization. And in the course of a year, the value of that receipt declines by the amount that the grain in the warehouse deteriorates or is eaten by mouse or gets moldy or whatever. So you can't save it. You can't save the money, you have to actually spend it. It isn't the source of wealth. It isn't considered wealth because you have to spend it by the end of the year when you get new receipts for the grain that you get. It's good for that year, basically, and by the end of the year it's worth about 10% less. So all of the wealth of that society is in the monuments, it's in the buildings, it's in the palaces, it's in the fertilized fields, it's in the irrigation system, it's in all these tangible things. It's in the general well-being of the community, the fact that there's lots of time for celebration and participation in religion. Bernard Lietaer describes in great detail what happened during the Middle Ages. When the Roman Empire, which had a debt-based monetary system, when the Roman Empire collapsed because people lost faith in the value of the Roman currency, and it took about 300 years for the Roman Empire to collapse, you had the Dark Ages. But in the towns, the merchants, the producers, would all come together once a week in the market. And they invented the same idea, market money. So I brought so much bread to the market, I can issue the amount of receipts for my bread that I believe I will be able to sell, the amount of bread that will be in demand at the market. And I can spend my receipts for my bread in the market for whatever else, because they have confidence and they will come back and redeem it in bread. And if all the merchants do that, then there is no shortage of money for the people to buy everything that's available in the market that's in demand. So Bernard Lietaer and various economics students, they investigated the medieval economy. So in the village, the market's once a month, but in the bigger city, the market's once a week. And no shortage of money. The consequence was that about a third of the population is the nobility. They're not working. They're lording it over everybody, basically. About a third of the population is clergy. They're living in the monasteries, they're the nuns and the monks and the Templars and what have you. They're providing quite a bit of their own stuff, but none of the other stuff, not the horseshoes and not any of the other things that they need, not all the religious implements and all that, that's all being done by the guilds in the city. So there are some peons, there are some peasants, and there are people who are working the land for but most of the economy of the Middle Ages is the guilds in the cities. So they calculate 1/3 of the population, the peasants and the craftspeople, are providing all the things that the entire population needs, and judging by the amount of feast days and the amount of time that people are having to spend on doing that, 1/3 of the population is working 14 weeks out of the year in order to provide what the entire population needed. In England, they didn't have market money, they had tally sticks. Nobody knows what a tally stick is because that's all been suppressed with the beginning of the Bank of England, but the king issued as payment receipt for whatever the services that the king wanted with the tally stick, and it had notches, this hickory stick with notches in it. And you split it in half so that it can't be counterfeited. If anybody doubts that it's an official tally stick, they can bring it back to the treasury and match the two pieces. It is. If it doesn't match, it's counterfeit. And you go to the tower, you get your head cut off or whatever. And the king also issues silver pennies. But the point is that there's no shortage of money. If there's no shortage of money, we can have a just and sustainable abundance. And we can spend, based on, there was a boycott of Mitsubishi in the 90s that I got very involved in. And we had all this from Freedom of Information Act and just from all their published reports. Mitsubishi does everything. Mitsubishi was cutting down the Amazon rainforest for prairie for cattle and what have you. Mitsubishi does everything. They make heavy machinery, they make computers, they make cars, they make trucks, they make everything. And we had all the statistics from them. So we know what it takes to provide for the entire world, all the stuff, agriculture and heavy, machinery and everything, because Mitsubishi does it all. They do it with so many 100,000 people, and they provide this percentage of the entire world's economy. And if you extrapolate that, it means that everybody would have to work 3 hours a week. 3 hours a week in order to provide everything that the world consumes. Oh my God, how is this monetary system is really amazing. Whatever they've been doing that has everybody scraping and not making enough, and it gets worse and worse, and they wiped out the middle class with the collapse and, you know, with the pump and dump of the economy in 2008, 2009. This is absolutely amazing. So I'm saying, what are we going to do about this? And I gathered a bunch of people, mostly from the 9/11 Truth Group in the Berkshires that I participated in. And nobody thought that there was anything to know about the money. I had a really hard time getting this group together. We spent 12 weeks, 3 hours a week, reading Ellen Brown's Money is Debt, Stephen Zarlenga's The Lost Science of Money, Bernard Lietaer's book, David Corton, a whole bunch of people. Paul Hellyer. And we came to the conclusion that issuing the money, this was a very laborious, mind-bending, mind-blowing experience of all these people, and including myself. We came to the conclusion that the sovereign, whoever's the sovereign, issues the money in order to create the conditions in which the people live. So whoever is issuing the money is the actual sovereign. And the actual sovereign is the Rothschild. Well, there are actually 13 families that make up, and we know nothing about them. And they're not on the Forbes 400. And the Forbes 400 has half the wealth of the entire country, and none of this makes any sense. So we take a deep breath and we say, what are we going to do? Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to get our own bank, because banks create money. And if we own the bank, and so Ellen Brown's developing the Public Banking Institute, and I go to the first public banking conference. And so in 2009, we've decided that we're going to figure out how to create a bank. And we run across the effort to establish a common good bank, and I get connected to William Spademan, who's developing this idea for the common good bank. And we worked together for 3 years, realized we're never going to be able to raise the money to charter a bank, and they won't let us charter new banks after the banking crisis. And we come up short raising the money to buy a bank. We needed 18 million, we got to 12. I mean, okay, we're not going to manage a bank. So what is money? Well, money, by its very nature, is a social convention or a matter of law, which is a matter of agreement in a community to use something as the medium of exchange, which we could control. So in a community, we could issue something other than the dollar as the medium of exchange. Let's not bother with the new unit of value. Everybody knows what a dollar's worth. And if the dollar's inflating, we'll just issue some more of our medium of exchange, the one that we're using by agreement. So William and I came up with the idea of rebels. And our currency is going to be called Rebels. And it's going to be a mutual credit. Actually, it's going to be a community-created credit system. And all that's necessary is that you agree to transfer dollars from your bank account into the community's account, and we will issue the same amount of Rebels as the dollars that you put in, and we will trade with Rebels, and we won't spend the dollars, and then we'll get to decide as a community what to spend the dollars for that we're not using because they're just sitting in the community account. I'm going to do that for you guys again. We all agree that we're going to trade with Rebels. So let's transfer the dollars that we would normally have spent from our bank account to the community account. And then we'll issue into your Rebel account the same amount of Rebels. In fact, we could issue more as an incentive if we wanted to. And we'll trade with Rebels. And if you need to trade your Rebels for dollars, well, you can take them out of the community account. But the more you do that, the less dollars we'll have to decide what to do with as a community. But you need to be able to do that so that nobody's going to lose out because you don't have enough places to spend them. So our only challenge, the only thing that we have to do is get the businesses where we shop to accept Rebels as well as dollars. And to pay their suppliers, of which there are quite a few in Greenfield. We're doing this in Greenfield, Massachusetts, where William lived. There are quite a few. In fact, there's some worker-owned cooperatives in Greenfield, and they were enthusiastic about this, and they could pay their suppliers, because one is an artisan beverage business, and the other is Real Pickles. So they make sauerkraut and pickles and stuff like that. So we get their farmers, some of the farmers that supply them, to agree to take Rebels, and we create a little economic circle, so they pay their employees. We got the co-op, we got one of the supermarkets, we got, the coffee shop and the office supply, the locally owned office, not the Staples, the locally owned office supply coffee shop place to accept Rebels, and we were off and running. And we now have 280 people who are participating. We have 40 businesses, and last year we gave away $10,000, and this year we're deciding whether we can give away 30. Well, 30. The vote that we're putting out to the community is whether to be really conservative and only give away 10, or 20, or 30. I'm recommending 30. Various other people are saying that's too risky. There's $90,000 in the community account, but it goes down every once. Well, it hasn't during the past 2 years. It never went below 30. So why shouldn't we be able to give away 30? It was always at least 30,000 in the community account. So that's where we are. We've proved that the system works, and there's very, very, very minimal transaction costs because we're using the internet and the QR code, which you can take a picture of. So this is my personal common good account card. And the merchant has a smartphone. And the smartphone takes a picture of the QR code, and it takes them right to the internet. So there's really minimal transaction costs, the costs of the server, right? And William's a brilliant programmer. And then this is my Just Abundance card. Anyway, what I need to tell you is that we put together a board of directors, and the first thing they did was said, you can't call them Rebels. You'll never get anywhere calling it Rebels.
Resembles Russian rubles.
Yeah. So we decided to call them our credits. And then after a little further on, this was only about a year ago, we decided to just call everything Common Good. So we issue Common Good, it's the Common Good payment system, we're creating a Common Good community where it's all about the common good. And we have a weekly, well, it's not weekly, we have a monthly meeting in Greenfield where we talk about this. Now, from the moment at which this group decided that we needed to do a bank, in other words, we need to do our own money. The only way that we will ever have any impact on the existing system is if we're able to issue money, because we'll never be sovereign, we'll never be in charge, we'll never be able to create the conditions in which we live until we're issuing money. So if we're issuing money, then we'll be able to decide as a community what to issue money for, and by deciding together what to issue money for, we'll be able to create the community that's run the way we believe it should be run. the community that is creating the conditions in which we want to live. Now, I stayed very much involved during that whole time with the Public Banking Institute and Ellen Brown, and with Stephen Zarlenga and the American Monetary Institute. So Dennis Kucinich introduced legislation to implement the American Monetary Act, so we actually have the entire legislation all ready to go to reform the Fed, incorporate it into the Treasury, issue the money directly to create the infrastructure, to create all the stuff that the government should be doing, and of course they redistrict Dennis Kucinich out of the Congress, just like they do anybody, unless they can't, and then they kill them. So the most important thing is that whatever it is that we do, we are not going to mess with the existing. The Public Banking Institute is getting close, but what does a public bank do? It's still monetizing our credit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the interest is supposedly going to come back to, but it changes, it actually changes very little. Not that I'm not a very strong advocate for public banks, because it does shift the sensibility. Money should be something that's issued publicly, but it's still issuing money instead. So I'm still on the trail of what money is and what effect does it have, and I discover some things. One of the things that I discovered is that regulating the money supply is based on three things. In other words, if we're going to be issuing money, we're going to have to issue the money in such a way that there's always the right amount of money and it maintains its value. It doesn't inflate, it doesn't deflate. As Lincoln said, that's a matter of practical administration. So what do you have to do in order to regulate the money supply? You have to take three things into account. How much money is in circulation? It's called the money stock. How much money have we issued? Right? How much money is out there in the economy? The second thing you have to look at is how quickly is the money circulating? How many transactions is each of that money stock facilitating? Right? So there's two things going on there. One is the amount of money, and the other is how many transactions it's facilitating. The velocity of the money, that's the rate of the circulation. And then the third thing is how much of the money stock is not circulating because it's being saved. Right? So if you keep those things in balance, if the circulation slows, you might have to issue more money. If the savings rate goes up, you might have to issue more money stock. If the rate of circulation slows, speeds up, you might have to take, if the money stock is facilitating an increasing number of trades because it's circulating faster, you might have to take some money stock out in order to maintain the value. But this is totally practical science. It's a totally practical, basically mechanical thing. If we're all using the QR code, we know. We know exactly how much money we've issued, how much money is circulating, we know the rate of, so the website gives you all that information. You can just watch the graphs change in real time. We, as a community, can decide. So now we get to the next little piece of this. The money is the spirit realized. And this is the most important thing to grasp. Whoever is issuing money to represent value that's a potential, right? So I have this brilliant idea for a new product, the artificial leaf, and I can't do anything to make the artificial leaf circulate, become a real good, and unless I have the capital up front. What is that capital? That capital is a recognition by my community that this idea that I have for the artificial leaf, right, that creates hydrogen and oxygen, that can run everything, all the internal combustion engines, all the heating, all the electricity that we could ever need, right? I'm inspired. if my community capitalizes me to make the artificial leaf, then that artificial leaf is the spirit realized. I am actually, we as a community are actually in a position to create an amazing amount of value. Okay, it turns out that I've been capitalized and I've made the artificial leaf, and no matter what I do, it doesn't work. It's not doing anything. It's not. Well, we've just issued millions and millions of dollars to make and there's now millions of dollars too much in our economy, too much money stock. If we want the money to maintain its value, we're going to have to take that out. Okay, so it's been spent, so it's circulating, so everybody's going to have a little bit of a reduction. Ah, but wait a second. The artificial leaf was brilliant, and it really succeeded. And it totally replaces fossil fuels. And all the all the coal plants, all the gas-fired plants. There's no need for fracking anymore. The amount of value that it creates is incredible. What do we have to do? We have to keep issuing money to represent all that new value. And now we're all just working 3 hours a week. And we're getting the check at the beginning of the month. Why? So that we can do whatever it is that we feel called to do. So we can have a dividend from the economy that we all created together. So if I get the check at the beginning of the month as my equitable share of the value that we all created together, in order to be able to do whatever it is that I want to do, I'm going to need to know what it is that I want to do. What do I want to do? What is the one thing that I want to do that's going to make me happy? And every single one of you and everyone who's watching this video knows at some point in their life they were inspired to do something. And they are either doing it or they were dissuaded from doing it because they needed to earn money. You get the check at the beginning of the month as your equitable share of the surplus that we all create by realizing the spirit through capitalizing a good idea that we agreed was a good idea, that worked, that created ongoing huge amounts of value. Mm-hmm. How much cash does Apple have? That it doesn't even know how to invest or spend because it invented something really good. Hi, we can do that, and then we should all share. Okay, what is it that I really want to do? And amazingly, what I really want to do is the thing that I see my community needs that basically only I can do. And if I do that, and if it's recognized and considered valuable, if it's in demand, then I get that recognition that's the most important thing to making me happy. And only I can do, I have to be able to do it entirely autonomously. I have to be able to do it the way that I want to do it. Well, guess what? Everybody else is really interested in my wonderful inspiration for what it is that I want to do, and to the extent that I need other people to help me to do it, they want to help. And they're only spending 3 hours a week on it, so everybody's doing something that they really want to do and helping the other people to do what they really want to do and what makes us happy. So here we go. We secure each other's life by providing each other with the income that we need to live. If you have an income that's unearned, that you didn't have to do anything for, so that you can buy whatever it is you need to live, then your life is secure. You are now free, at liberty, to do what it is that you feel called to do. So I have life and liberty. And what makes me happy? Doing something that I can do, learning how to do it better, developing my capacity to do it the way that I want to do it. With the recognition from my community, because they'll pay for it or because they applaud me. And I now realize the American ideal of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So now there are all kinds of things that come up, all kinds of things that come up. Oh my God, this could never work. What are you talking about? You're nuts. We know we can't, nobody could ever agree to anything. We could never sit together and figure out anything. Well, of course. That's exactly the situation that we're in. We have absolutely no experience of being a community. We get to vote for who? The lesser of whatever evils. That's all we ever get to do. And Congress does what the people, according to Pew, Congress does what people want only 0.5% of the time.
Yeah,
So representative democracy has completely failed us.
Yep.
So what we need is a sociocracy. We need the system of governance that allows us to decide together with the people that we associate with, that we know, in a way that allows everybody to have a genuine voice in what it is that we're working on. And we need to be organized in such a way that we're a group this big, or approximately this big, could be a little bit bigger, could be a little bit smaller, working on an aim together that we agree is worthwhile, something that would be good. So we're the group that's working on whatever it is we're working on, dealing with the de facto. I mean, we're the group that has the aim of helping each other get ourselves independent of the de facto. And we go around the circle every time and we hear from each one of us about what it is that we are trying to decide we're going to do. How are we going to help each other when we're being called to task by the de facto, right? When we've gotten a traffic ticket or something. So there's a proposal that is a result of what everybody thought we should do. And we end up sort of having the sense that we've come up with something that we could get behind, and so we consent to it. And we can consent to it, not because we all agree that that would really work and that that's the best, but it's good enough for now. And it's safe enough to try. And if we consent to it, and we put a time frame on it, we're going to try this for the first 3 cases that come up. And if it works, we're going to carry on. And if it works once but not twice, we're going to re-examine the whole thing and come up with something else. If it works twice and not once, we're going to look at, we're going to come up with a way of evaluating it after the 3rd one. And we're going to go around the circle again, and we're going to hear from everybody how successful they think it was and what it is that we can do. We'll need a facilitator. We'll need somebody to help make sure that the process really is equivalent, that we really are hearing from everybody, that nobody is dominating. We will need a reporter. We will need somebody who is going to keep an accurate record of what we did so that there's a real history of our group and we can refer to it and we can settle the arguments that arise about what it was that we decided. We'll need a recorder, somebody who will be able to tell us that the time has arrived for the evaluation. And we will need a leader. We will need to make sure that there's somebody whose task it is to make sure we stay on task. And we will need a delegate to represent our circle, to be the voice of our circle in the other circles of people with a similar aim or if we're doing it in the neighborhood, between the different wards, or the jural assemblies, or however it is that we end up, the nomenclature that we end up using. So we have a leader, we have a facilitator, we have a recorder, and we have a delegate. And we have the administrative strength to actually accomplish something. This is called sociocracy. And what I'm getting at is that you need two things. You need community-created credit, and you need a decision-making process that honors our equivalence among people who know each other, or who get to know each other because they're all working together on the same thing. It's called sociocracy. We have the common good payment system, common good, for the community-created credit, and we have sociocracy for all. It's also an organization in the Pioneer Valley. Both of them are in the Pioneer Valley to help us learn how to govern ourselves. So, to end, when Thomas Jefferson was finished with his presidency, he went back to Monticello, and if you've ever been to Monticello, you know that he had a writing machine that made a copy of everything so that he could keep it. So we have good records of what Thomas Jefferson wrote. He wrote to all these people that he was friends with, that he was colleagues with, that had been part of his government, and he said, we got it all wrong. During my presidency, just about everything that I had to do as president, such as the Louisiana Purchase and support that dictator Napoleon, I did because I was pressured to by political parties which did not have the common good at heart. They did not want something that would be good for everyone. They wanted what would be good for them. Mm-hmm. How in the world did we ever allow 9 men in black robes to overrule the will of the people? We got it all wrong. The separation of powers is how we got it wrong. We need a ward republic. We need to have all the elements of government handled at the local level among people who know each other, who can meet with each other, in order to be sure that we are always doing what the people
Well,
want.
we've got the foundation. We just need to build the building now.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, the Republic's been brought forward, and all the positions that you just mentioned, we have similar, we call them the scribe, we call them the commissioner, but they're exactly as you have described it.
Excellent.
So I have a question for you.
Go right ahead.
We're still using dollars. When I've spoken with Hartford Van Dyke, he says that somebody is going to have to be able to do both, operate in both the de facto system and and the community. Okay, so how do you keep the de facto from coming in and demanding a piece of all these trades?
We let them have it.
Oh, you give it to them.
Of course.
Okay.
We have no argument with the de facto, because as soon as you have an argument with the de facto, you're part of the de facto. We have no argument with them. This is the society that we're subject to. We're creating the new society in which we will, within a relatively short amount of time, will be able to totally ignore you. As soon as people catch on to what it is that we're doing, and we've actually got enough going, who's going to want to participate in the de facto? Everybody's going to be doing what we're doing. Why? As soon as we're giving everybody, in other words, Michael, why can't I think of his name? He does the local economy and local markets and money, local money. Why can't I think of his name?
Mike Adams?
No. Anyway, he's pointed out that if we get to between 5 and 10% of the local economy, we are in a position to do health care, to do a basic income or a dividend income. We're in a position to fund an amazing amount of stuff. just with the, that kind of percentage
Mhm.
of an economy. So if we can get a community like Brockton or wherever anybody is, like Greenfield. I mean,
That's the plan.
That's
to
the
have,
plan.
You've got a situation. Now, do you have people in place to do a jural assembly out there?
Well,
Or, I know you have a grand jury.
no.
You don't, the grand jury
In
doesn't-
Greenfield, we have a group of people who are participating in the system who have no clue what they have. They have no idea what we've got.
Yeah.
So they haven't recognized it. I got asked to resign from the board of Common Good because I talk about this stuff. And they're all afraid of me. I'm much too controversial. I'm talking about stuff that, is going to drive people away. I'm obviously crazy. I'm off my rocker. I've got some sort of,
Well, they'll say,
mental illness of some kind.
Which is why we love you so much, John.
well, they'll say you.
We all have that same
So-
illness here, incidentally.
Yeah.
We're all of us. We're all part
Everybody in
of
this
it.
room has that
So,
illness, yeah.
so when I talk about common good, as you just heard me talk, I don't say anything controversial. I mean, I said a lot that's somewhat controversial, but you can get the idea. If we limit a common good community to the people, what Jefferson suggested is that the idea of the English 100 was a good idea. So 100 people, you can know 100 people. If you go through all the people that you know, you'll come up with between 100 and 250, maybe 300 people who know you by name, know something about you, might even know the name of your wife. So you can come up with about 100 people who actually know you, or that you know them or know something like that. So if you go through it, you get stuck somewhere around 20. And then you start thinking, well, yeah, if I met so-and-so again at the hotel or whatever, we would remember, So you got your whole class, you got your college class, you got all the coworkers where you work. So it's not hard to get up to the 100 where they sort of know you. So 100, or out of 100 people, you would generally be able to have 40 people or so who would be willing to step up as citizens. And of the 40, you would probably be able to get somewhere between 10 and 30, 10 and 20 to actually meet on a regular basis. So that's the idea of the 100. Everything is at the level of 100. So at the level of 100, you have enough of diversity of professions, not enough for a society, so you have to cooperate with all the other hundreds in your neighborhood. But if that's basically your idea, that the ward or the jural assembly is 100 people, the people from whom the jury is drawn, is about 100 people, and they're responsible for, the jural assembly is responsible for all the functions of government. So if you have a delegate from your 100 to the group of hundreds that, I don't know, the 10 or 20 or 30 group of hundreds, then you have a group of the administration of your neighborhood. So anything that your little group can't handle, the neighborhood handles. The neighborhood to the borough or to the city, to the town, the towns to the city to the county to the state to the
Definition of a republic.
And yeah,
It is a definition.
That's the word republic.
That's the republic.
And Jefferson says, the people will know who the best person to carry out this function of government that we need. We will select the person and they will serve as long as they're doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need an executive, and we don't need a judicial, and we don't need a legislature. We need the people to run the country. And everything that happens at the next higher level has to be approved by the people below.
Yeah.
And if we use sociocracy, and it's based on consent, good enough for now, safe enough to try, right? Let's not get into perfection, right? Perfection is the enemy, or the best solution. It's the enemy. We need to do the minimal viable product. We need to be agile. We need to create something, see how it works, and refine it. We need to be deciding, we need to get together with an agenda that's well prepared, and we need to go through it like boom, 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 boom. Good enough to try? Everybody consent? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What's your quick reaction to this? Well, I think that we would be, but let's just get to a place where we can try something and see how it works. And if we need to provide something that has to do with the police power, let's make sure that we haven't appointed the bully to be the policeman.
Mhm.
And why should the policeman be a full-time job? It shouldn't. Why should anything be a full-time job? In fact, why shouldn't we be letting everybody have at least some experience? I mean, sure, some people are way, I don't want somebody managing the manufacturing who isn't a good manager, right? I don't want to let everybody try and make a mess. On the other hand, I want everybody to have the opportunity to be able to try to do whatever it is that they would really like to try their hand at. To be able to do that which, this is another Buckminster Fuller quote, by the way, to do that thing which they see needs to be done, that they know how to do, that nobody else sees. So you're doing what you feel called to do autonomously, with the opportunity to develop your capacities ongoing to do it. The last thing that I want to say is that because our rights are what unite us and the privileges are what divide us, right? As soon as we're talking about what we all have a right to and the privileges are